Ngöndro 말하면서 그러면서 저는 좀 시행이 되면서 그래서 인적 그치지요. 시행이 되면서 내가 공부적인 말하면서 딱 그러다 맞죠? 그럼 체시된 거리가 아니라 말하면서 견체시. 그래서 좀 맞죠? 좀 체시니까 다행은 견체시 공부들이 뭔가 내가 시행인데 뭔가 때 많이 와. 이때 미시아를 가르치는 말처럼 now something 말이었어. I'm proud. Don't 지금 보이고. 어쨌든 니들은 말이었어. 니가 제일 같은 말이었어. 그다음 맞춰도 말이었으니까 니들 그 말이었던 나 20을 하고 있어. 말하는데 마치 해봐 있는 사람인가, 마치 보이는 사람인가, 마치 저 친구들이 있는 말이었다. 돌아를 주시고요, 만성을 주시고요. 뭐 다들 말하면서 쓰라, 뭐 기쁘지무시, 뭐 respect지무시, 가래 가보지 라라라지. 근데 다다지 좀 되던 말하면서 상기다 shaking hand. Hello, how are you, Buddha? Hey, Chinese, you have 1,000 arms. I don't have that. I have a lot of jets. Hey, Father Kala, you have so many, ambulances. About one, or maybe cancer. So what? Namba Sanjay did Mare. Gyatrul Rinpoche, Lama Rinpoche, the Chison will cut the Jubitan. Tombo Garanti Lama Top. Lost in a top, probably lost in a thousand, lost in so much of top champion. So the Lama Ten Jabite, Tambota, Tenite, Jiftin, the Choco Thomas in Gavamare. Sangi Village, Yapoyam, Papa, Tenatini, Hassan Zedit, Lama, Sangi and Shinan, Sangi, which in Latin Jacare. Sanjay, Kansa Tamar was you came out. Very Panaransel, wonderful. Lama came the Lama Sanjay must be in Naya. Lama Taba coming meditate, and I thought Sanjay mind Shakataba in Naya. So the Taba, you around Lama Chiso, the Sanjay, the Chiso, the Sanjay song, the God. So the Taba took care of it. Mama the painter at Tapajana, Maran the painter, Maran the painter, Mr. Maran. Mama the Katanka, Sanjay the painter, Chila Tankama. It's a magic yen or magic Lama in Nani, Kepa in Nani. Or any long boat chamber. Stuart, Yapa, bullshit. The doctor. It's a lot of children. Sit on that around the tongue. Kepa the yen and Yapore, Kepa to the night. On that Tapa, you're letting this on about the fountain chamber of all that day. Kamanina, Kachinina, Nakchan, Pajin, Thompson. I don't any room by the Thompson. Lama give up on the go get the Mandutan directed. So that is Katsaman. Good at some of them. And then go get the Mandu, about Chumbo came down. Give out a killer. Go and then not channeling it. Go and the Mandu. The man to tell you. 암종에 전에 쭉 꼬마니 뭐 차지 전에 뭐 제때문에 파워를 참 뭐 제때문에 파워 embarrassing just jumping so that she 타라다 남친한테 받쳐서 타만 직된데 뭐잖아 상대방 맛이 깨지셔 주고 저쪽으로서 잡잡면지나 나랑서 직발을 내가 가고 말았네 반다 생겼는데 이런 시험인데 메카디는 제가 저는 야와르 붙이가니 노직하면 잡세서도 이제 손들 맞다 직초면 가까이 손이나 같은 스티프 가오르죠 다른 것들도 같이 전달을 잘라라 쳤어요 이거는 이거 유식도 또 주체적인가 아래 이게 내가 저 차트 그래서 차트 그래서 온다 제가 무슨 그게 තමයි 나 정말 지다데 단단 하랍스메다 나는 다행이네 나는 쳐다가 나는 녀치라고 제 지나도 되는 말아 제 차트는 차트 말아 되는 잠을 되는 나도 정말 카마르다는 말아 제 차트 차트 말아 잠을 어쨌든 지금 지거래 저한테 취재나 내 친구시는 시간이야 버려 마시나야 난가도 저때지 시거래
난가
마마 그때 남자 키도 시거래 맞아 내가 텔레비전에 때 I am proud man and so embarrassing. I'm proud of women. I can't forget how far you can go. 100 years. Sometimes I'm proud of men. That's a good guy. Yeah, I'm going to do that.
So last night I made some comments about the proper way to relate or to show one's devotion to one's spiritual mentor in the Guru Yoga. This is something we need to look at very closely because this is really, from my experience, my observation, this is really the primary fault, major problem in this Dharma center, generally Dharma centers in the West. There is a reason for it, and that is people don't have much experience in Dharma, really don't know Dharma very well. And then with that ignorance, with not having much knowledge of Dharma, then there persists this strong sense of I am, no in Tibetan, I am proud, I am proud. Now if we take that same type of mundane pride and then slip it right over into stage regeneration practice, where we're generating ourselves as the deity, as the yidam, then we may conflate that mundane pride, that mundane arrogance, sense of self-importance with the divine pride of the yidam. Now the yidam is a primordial wisdom being, jnana, or jnanasattva. But this is a radically different type of pride, or divine sense of identity, than the mundane. So to conflate these two is a radical error. We, in terms of mundane pride, this is based upon such senses, the sense or self-evaluation that, oh, I'm knowledgeable, I'm learned, I'm rich, I'm somebody very special. But that type of pride just leads to the perpetuation of samsara and to taking lower rebirth. Whereas, of course, the pride, the divine pride of the Yidam and Vajrayana practice leads to liberation. So they lead to radically different results. So there's not much of a custom in this country, in this civilization, for showing respect. And so most people don't even know they don't even know what it means, really. They don't know how to practice it. So even if people were to meet the Buddha himself, they would have no idea what to do, how to show any kind of respect or reverence. They just kind of walk up to the Buddha and say, Hiya, and put out the hand and put her there. Or they might meet Chenrezig and want to reach out the one hand and then kind of be intimidated by the 1,000 hands facing you, saying, gee, you got 1,000 of them, I only have one. Then you might feel a little bit envious. 2 hands against 1,000 is not quite fair. Or if you bumped into Vajrakalaya, people again stick out their hand, oh, you got more hands than I do. But then on the other hand, so what? So there's kind of attitude that, well, we're pretty much as good as anybody else. This is not a Buddhist approach. This is not true in Buddhism. Whether it's for your Dharma teacher, for your Lama, it's important, first of all, to investigate well. Investigate for as long as 3 years, longer if necessary, but examine well to see whether this person is an authentic teacher or guru. Once you've established that relationship, that is the guru relationship, or guru-disciple, or lama-disciple relationship, then from that point you don't simply regard this person simply as a friend, a comrade, or a buddy. If you do so, then there's no blessings. Whereas in contrast, you look upon the guru as a Buddha. And by so doing, then you receive the blessings of a Buddha. Whereas if you look upon your guru as simply an ordinary being, more or less like yourself, then there's no blessings at all. It's just a flat relationship, a mundane relationship. Even if you encountered an actual Buddha, the Buddha Shakyamuni himself, if you have no reverence, then you really get no benefit. So the degree of blessing, the degree of benefit we derive from our relationship with the Lama is really primarily contingent upon the depth of our own faith, our reverence, our pure vision, and not simply the qualities of the teacher, him or herself. Even if just an old man, just an ordinary old man or an ordinary old woman, even if it's a dog's tooth, as many of you know that story, if you have the faith, then you can receive the blessings of the Buddha. Now in that type of relationship, or one looks upon the guru as an enlightened being, who derives the benefit from that? The student. We do. We get the benefit. If the Lama doesn't get benefit from that, the Buddha doesn't get benefited from that, the Dharma doesn't get benefited from that, the recipient of the benefit, the blessings, is the student. Whereas in contrast, if we sit back on our haunches and then just kind of take pride in our own learning, our own qualities, our own achievements, this is basically the same as the excretion that comes out of a rear end of a large bull. Sometimes you know this bullshit. It's good to be learned. There's nothing wrong with being learned. This can be helpful, whether one is following the Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana path. These are all authentic paths. Now in this context, so it's not to say that it shouldn't be learned, but basing one's sense of mundane pride or arrogance upon that is really foolishness. Now some say, for a teacher in the modern world, you don't really need to have a lineage. You don't need to be part of a guru lineage tracing back to the Buddha. If you have that idea, then why don't you check it out? Check out the Vinaya. Check out the writings, the teachings, the Buddha's own teachings, in terms of ethics, monastic morality, and so forth. Check it out to see whether that view is corroborated by the Buddha's own teachings. Check out the Mahayana scriptures, the Vajrayana tantras. See for yourself, is this true or not, rather than just having a groundless opinion. So such people, they really behave as if they've never even heard Dharma. I mean, it's really quite shameless. There's kind of no sense of how do you say, humility in that at all. And yet with so few qualities, so little understanding, some of these people think they're even more powerful, they're more powerful than Mao Zedong himself. But by following that, not only is there no liberation, there is no enlightenment, but this isn't even helpful for pursuing mundane ends, this kind of pride or arrogance. If we look at the truly enlightened beings, such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or Gyatru Rinpoche, Gyatru Rinpoche, how they regard themselves and what kind of demands they place on others. They don't even demand a high throne. They don't demand anything at all. They're perfectly simple, happy to be just simple practitioners, simple Buddhist monk. On the other hand, other people without anything remotely like that degree of realization is often we hear, oh, I didn't get a good enough cushion. I need something special. I want a higher cushion. I want a better cushion than this. So this type of sense that one is entitled, one deserves some kind of special status, this is just shameful. So whether we're learned or not, whether we have vast learning in the Dharma or not, what is most important, at least, is to have a good understanding of the memak, the quintessential instructions for the sake of practice from an authentic lineage guru or gurus. This is crucial. At least have that. In contrast, to what we hear coming over the television so often, and that is touting pride as if it's some really glorious quality that we'd all want to emulate. For example, on television, it's not uncommon to watch some program where some big heroic figure, some man appears on the screen and says, "I'm a proud man," as if it's something really to be proud about. Or some woman saying, "I'm a proud woman," as if this is something to be proud about. They should be embarrassed. They should be, "I'm a proud man and I feel so awful about it." That's what they should really be saying. I mean, you have that kind of pride. How long will it last? You think you can be proud and arrogant for 100 years before it just piffles out?
We understand. We're not. No, that I don't proud of that. That's Patinum Patinum Benechikuar Matsurayam. Milamat, the house in Zambin in Yomare. The Choyan knows it. Charlon knows it. Zanga Lama gave them a children, Mahan. Net. So they are and Jana just how much. Young chosen to make the touch, made Portomoto that. Oh, my daughters are special, so Gamotus of the Pahadi up and Chichi, put or Gapotus, put the up in Chichi, but the cheaper. Who Pomoja and Amaya in Napala page at the Popper. Gamma Gapachan is also put the starch by Chichi. The other than gets it. So to travel on a society, Tapas, Yapar, Tapas, Yapsi. Or Ringayas and we're going to sort of come that the children, you know, the gender is on the God. This is sort of hang out. Should they and youngs and down at the children. Then it in the Kebat, there's a chew boats and then something on the Pambali, chew Sona, carrying the family, Peter Lamsa. Lama Dipan of Sorata, and sort of Stavalama part of Sorata and Dodo. Can't change it. Matsuina, that Arita in the Chitera, I'm proud of them. There are so mother and different. So there are Chendab Juvada, or Pachemiwada, non Chendab Zivita. So somebody about and it's down to the somebody from the land. Mata Naji in Zedania, Chora, garbage can and the other can be not proud in the world. What did we get? Genius of sort of everything. I am proud to say, Choba. Genius Tamchi. Sort of stone there, Kalion. Tamchi. You need religion and not paid. Katina Tamchi, then we don't have last name, then to Mabon Chicken, not type of Katina, Jabi and that. Jumping around the Makaru Bachipani game Marwa, boyfriend Marwa. You don't know. Lama Chendabi, you know, then son, they don't do good on the Chikapin, some of the way. Yadam Lama, some. That's it. Godita Lamaya, Margoti the Lama Jetta. And not the Tommy Mark. Lama, I need the Lama, I did it a Lama can. Margoti Lama, it's some year, the gun. Cheer the number, Genda, the gun. The number can read the number. Thousand cars of in there, with the gun in there. I'm going to retreat. Did you support me? Exactly on top of mother. I retreat out of it. Chick Mari, me, Mari, Kanga, the tradition that was a car. Takano, the other color. Retreat is something like a chip of the middle. My sponsor, you will do. 그래서 들려도 그는 탑시오 들려도 마성 내가서라 번째 남아가는 만점 부러졌는데 잡아지는 마음반에 그까 취대 주시는 작전성을 아바 아만 잘봐 그래서 판독하죠. 아주 취재 불치 취재가 취시는 마음반에 심지어 판독하자기는 그런 타라 도체 아바 마찬가 타라 등남천 도체 비용 그래서 그냥 같이 방에서 교회 관계 무엇도 라마타가 맞게 하나째 거구나. 공부하는 괜찮아. 그쪽으로 직전에 거구나. 이 마음반에 나서를 보. 그러니까 다 필요해.
So, rather than pride, maintaining or cultivating a sense of ordinary pride, mundane pride, it's better. Cultivate faith, cultivate pure vision. But in that context too, even when you start directing, having a sense of appreciation and faith for one's Lama, then there's another way that can go astray, and that is by telling everyone, oh, my Lama is the best in the world. My Lama is really foremost, better than all the other Lamas. And so this kind of elevating one's own Lama, that is just one more expression of prejudice, of bias, of attachment, and an expression of attachment and aversion. Attachment for one's own Lama, aversion for the other ones, saying the other Lamas of other traditions, and so forth and so on, that they're really, really not up to snuff. They're not nearly as good as my Lama. And so this just leads to more disgrace. This is really that kind of attitude of just inflating one's own Lama regarding with this prejudicial view, one's own Lama as being the very special one, the supreme one. This is like old grandpas and grandmas saying, oh, my son is the best in the world, my granddaughter is the best in the world. Or others saying, oh, my mom is my dad, my this, my that. It's just all of that is just attachment. And so there's really not any difference here. And so these parents will do this with regard to their children, praising their children, saying how extraordinary their children are, even if they have no special qualities at all. They'll superimpose them, they'll project them upon them, and then praise them to the skies. And so we can do exactly the same thing with our Lama, just projecting and then having all of this basically be an ego trip. As we're we're praising them because they're our Lama. And so it's basically just like this kind of parental infatuation. So with genuine faith is good. And then when it manifests by way of our body, speech, and mind, in terms of genuine service, this leads to true blessings. And then with receiving blessings, the accrual of merit, then this helps to dispel obstacles on our path. And so for the wise, those who really have understood Dharma, practicing well, then when they're engaging in practice, the first thing they will do is pray to the Guru lineage, tracing back to the Buddha. And by so doing, then they receive blessings, and by starting the practice in that way, having that being the basic orientation for the practice, then that already suppresses kind of the mundane sense of pride. But here in the West, in the United States, there is this weird sense that being proud is a good thing. It shows somehow that you're really quite excellent. But if you're walking around feeling this inflated sense of self-esteem, then you'll not make any genuine prayers of supplication for blessings. And not being open to them, not having that kind of faith, then you won't receive any blessings. So it's better just take refuge and put that ordinary sense of pride, put it right back in the garbage can where it belongs. Remember when you start your practice with such supplicatory prayer, asking for blessings, then there's no pride in that. We approach the whole practice with a sense of humility. And we'll see this is the path that has been followed by the great beings of the past. For example, Lama Mipam followed exactly this path. And eventually, when one does really gain greater erudition, greater understanding, and so forth, coming from this perspective, then you may start writing, like Lama Mipam Rinpoche. But who was his mentor? Who was his constant companion? It was Manjushri. Now, Manjushri was not with him just kind of like a buddy, but that was his guru, that was his Lama. And so there was again this guru-disciple relationship with Jambaya, Manjushri, was then his counselor who guided him in his practice, in his writings. And so by having that relationship, then great blessings that we see. We see in the life of Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, same thing. But it's also important in our relationship with the Lama to not let it be fickle. And that is to say, when some of us, like myself, sometimes in our own past, we may remember occasions where we really felt we needed a Lama. And then say, do you have a Lama? Do you have a relationship? Oh, yes, Lama is so important. Because right at that particular moment, we need. But then after some time, we may feel we don't need the Lama so much, and then, no big deal. And we kind of throw it aside like something we just don't require anymore. We can do the same thing. I've done the same thing myself with Dharma. When we really need it, then having big reverence and holding to it tightly. Likewise for the Sangha. But on other occasions, when we feel everything's going fine, then we just I'll just shove it aside, like it's irrelevant now. There are also some, in terms of practice, who make a loud fanfare about how they wanted to go into retreat. So they put up posters, they put up little messages. I am going into retreat. I need a sponsor to go into retreat. Please give me money. There's not just one or two of these people doing this. Then this is becoming more and more of a tradition here in the West. Please give me money. I want to go into retreat. What's the motivation? In some cases, I suspect I'll go into retreat. Then I don't have to work. Then I'll have a sponsor, and I can hang out. But this is a very poor motivation. In Tibet, there was something similar. There were parents in Tibet. As we know, many children became monks and nuns. And there were parents in Tibet who would encourage their boy or boys to become monks. With what motivation? In many cases, the motivation was, well, I'll send my little boy up to the monastery, and then I don't need to give him any more food or clothing. And he'll grow up, he'll learn something about Dharma, and then when I get older, then he'll be able to do pujas for me. And so he'll be able to help me. So I don't need to do anything for him, and he'll grow up and he'll do something good for me. How's that for a lousy motivation?
Maybe not too much. Yes. Well, then I come home to get him to bed. I don't know. I want to come home to somebody. Somebody's on my southern line, somebody's on the southern line. That come home to the dog or an chin, your balance, but you jump out of the come home to your position. Okay. I come home, you put your give out of the field. You have a chis a jigger. Well, not charging by which by the Chibai may in the Larotan, the chapter children, the child and the tinker, but some people can imagine some of them. Bachashiba, the Mala, Napsen, the Yoga, Napsen. Then you can do your part to the song of the something done maybe. Catching with the jumbling the colors, your canon, corruption like to figure it. Some design. Catching with the other little bit, the chamber and the other. No, that's a limit. I think Marana didn't get no. They can't wasn't get Mao, some nurse charging with this. Then Jim Married in them trout, Zanda Zasun at the trout. That's up is here. Yaratini, Trout even another days of Marina, my cemetery, but trout. I guess. Think more the career. More the giver at the Mugiva. You see that Maripatu, you see the person. Deda, Giva. Mugiva in the teller, Dribble career. Deva Yamara. There have been Tati and South China, Yapor, Chip, Mega, Chip. Many teaching on donation that person and money donated China. Chinese is Saturday, there is Chinese Sunday, some of them Sunday Tanjak of good, Sunday Tanjak of Sunday, Sunday Tanjak of two guests. Younger, the Trinity, the Patrul Rinpoche, some of the dollars. Money from Chip done. Oh, don't check Mumbo done. After Jordan, around the general. Then Margazam Lapan for the sun, Zambeling the Chuto Che. Yang, Narata Pay the or couple the time when you marry Parmaha, Chiki, come with it. I might get you there, Papa getting there, getting there. Mobile is even. I think money and then give that Magiva. Somebody children teach it on like the best like this. She was got it. Can say something you did it. Then nobody. And then just somebody children and give out the Magiva you get it things that they took notes. Some did that shoot again and the cat on teach it and the Tuglayam then teach it on the that's at them. No Tibetan getting Tambashik, that's a very long Sunday. I think that I haven't get the man on a teacher, Tomana, Chiadin on a teacher, again, then at the conjunction came on teacher on Sassam. Then Lama Yadam says, and I ran my Chani Lama, Chani Yadam said, give a bunch of dread as it can't get the teacher, Tamadan, Chalomos on. More on enthusiasm, say more on enthusiasm, correct. There is a Tapaya, Javadan, Manindana, or Gursin done by Manindana, Yaki Japan, Camera Kid, Lama, Sanjay, Charity, Genda, there is also Mama, the Ngöndro, Crossing 300, she's on the day. The name Rick Samaya, Sanjay, you pronounce it, Church, the other is Genda, the other, she's on the day. I'm actually in a name, one in the Tobiat, Chuda in the Tobiat, Manga in the Tobiat. Conjunction house calico. A pie in the Gergenda. That many constitution of some in the general so being many kerma. Tana Carpot Napocha Samari. Then near my line in Boyare, the Kangan, so low Johnson Chasomari. Money don't even there is someday government. Richard and dog government. Showing Samaya along in the church of somebody as in another production in nature something. Then you could colors that have the not jacket, Monday color. Money Conan, Monday Chutter, Tombots of Artifacts and Chin, the chicken does a party near the Tinta. Money don't
choose it on board.
I just some getting. Since I need a Sunday out of me, I feel like them. As long as you thought young, the content in the you might have put the tower or I shut up in the set of Gyatrul Rinpoche somewhere. Driven not upon the tower. Rinpoche intended to don't come on a Gyatrul Rinpoche somewhere. The young child got damaged in the dead to someone. I think that's I should get that. In Dutch questions.
Ranjki.
The column the long term can come on Somaya man. But the long term come somebody tap read there. Mika put left and there.
So it should be clear then that the most important thing is the motivation. And it's extremely important that we examine very carefully, in a continuing fashion, examine our own motivation. It's more important, it's more central or crucial than examining behavior. Behavior is an outward display, but motivation is the really core. On the other hand, there's another way of going astray here, and that is one may develop what one thinks is good motivation, and thinking, well, now since my motivation is good, I can do whatever I like. And then engage in all types of shameless behavior or non-virtuous behavior. So that also is one more error. Having the sense that, well, my motivation is so good, now I'm really a holy being, or I'm somebody very special. This gives me a broad license to do whatever I like. Big mistake. What are indications of having an authentic or really good Dharma practice? Clear indications are such mental afflictions as attachment and craving decrease. Avarice, this grasping at possessions and other worldly goods, this decreases. This is in contrast to what is again so common. It's massive avarice. Like we have this gargantuan mouth just wanting to consume all of the good things in the world. A great big mouth, as if our belly will get bigger and bigger as we get all the good things and get it come inside. And that can go right together with enormous sense of high self-esteem or arrogance, strong sense of anger, envy, such that even the tiniest little circumstance, little tiny catalyst, can immediately trigger envy or pride or irritation. So what's the nature of these mental afflictions? We should examine carefully. Such tendencies, are these virtuous or non-virtuous? Examine carefully. And it should be obvious when we inspect this very closely that the nature of this is non-virtuous, it's unwholesome. And the result of that is not joy. The result of that is just more suffering, dissatisfaction. So it's important to be always careful. Careful about our motivation, careful about our conduct. And in terms of practice, even if the practice is very simple, this can be very good, this can be quite adequate. Just reciting the mani, the Om Mani Padme Hum, looking at Chenrezi or Avalokiteshvara as the Buddha, maintaining this pure vision of all appearances being the body of the Buddha, all sounds being the speech of the Buddha, all thoughts being manifestations of Dharmakaya, maintaining this purity of vision. With that type of practice, even if you just recite one round, one mala of the Chenrezi, that's true practice. Or if you recite 1,000,000,000 or 1,000,000,000,000, good. One round, or 1,000,000,000, it leads to blessings. On the other hand, if you're engaging in such practice, don't follow some of the worst traditions of Tibet, where the old men and women would be sometimes reciting the mani throughout the day, but in the midst of reciting the mani, then be lacing that with kind of idle gossip and little snarly comments here and there, various types of speech aroused by the mental affliction. So it's Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, non-virtuous speech, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Don't do that. This is not like mixing samba and powdered cheese. For those of you who have not had that experience, that's your tough luck. You really miss something. But it's not like that. It's not like mixing two good things to make a better concoction. But mixing the mani with idle gossip, with non-virtuous speech, is just leading to a toxic compound. So we can do this likewise in taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. If this is mixed with non-virtue, then we're really toxifying Dharma. And toxifying Dharma leads to its destruction. Again, it's so easy to point the finger outwards to what has caused the great decline of Dharma, Buddha Dharma in the recent past, and point to the great villain, Mao Zedong. So he was the villain, he was the one that caused the destruction of Dharma. But when we mix our own Dharma practice with non-virtue, non-virtuous speech and the like, then we are the great destroyers of Dharma, not just Mao Zedong. We can do that in our relationship with the Lama, with the Yidam, insofar as we mix our practice relating to the Lama and the Yidam with the three poisons. Likewise, our practice of the essential nature, the manifest nature, the empty essential nature, the clear manifest nature, the all-expansive, compassionate nature. When we're engaging in the state regeneration practices, when we mix them with the three poisons, then once again, we are causing the demise of Dharma. So, applying ourselves to practice, whether it's the mani, or whether it's the 100-syllable mantra, or whether it's taking the refuge, what's important is to know the qualities of the refuges. By truly understanding, appreciating the qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, then this gives rise to authentic taking of refuge. And when one does that in its full depth, comprehensively, taking refuge, then receiving initiation is implicit in that. Receiving the oral guidance, the ti, is implicit in that. Receiving the menga, the quintessential practical instructions, implicit in that. There's really nothing better. Refuge really, in a way, contains it all. In terms of an example of a true practitioner, I take the example of one of my own teachers who recited the mani 3 or 4 trillion Ngöndro, some really large number. I think it's a trillion. Over the course of his life, 3 or 4 trillion of the Om Mani Padme Hum. As a result of this practice, and this was his practice throughout the day, he became an old man. His hair turned white, but as a result of his practice, his hair, which had already turned white, turned black again. And the lines on his face, just the lines of old age, those vanished. This doesn't require that we be in retreat. To engage in such practice, you don't need to be in retreat. You don't need to seek out a hermitage and plunk yourself down there. In the case of my teacher, he would be up at 3 o'clock in the morning. He'd make his grunting noises as he got up, and then he would just start reciting the mani. He'd have some breakfast, he'd have some lunch, there'd be no dinner. He'd just be reciting the mani throughout the day, and he'd recite sometimes as late as 1 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock early in the morning. Sometimes, frequently, it was amazing. He slept only like 2 or 3 hours. Now eventually, when things really fell apart in Tibet, things were becoming catastrophic there. Then I had already fled the country, become a refugee. My teacher stayed behind. He was actually a tulku of the enlightened activity, the Tinle of Dzogchen. So it's a great tulku. But when he saw that what was happening, Gyatrul Rinpoche had already left, he looked around, he took in the situation, said, it's time for me to die. And so shortly thereafter, about a month later, then he just died. Died of natural causes. And so when we hear of such a teacher, this can really give rise to faith. In addition, the same Lama, his name was Tukun Natsoro, he also gave me a number of prophecies about my own life. Quite a number. And every single one of them has turned out to be true.
Many change. Some of them Choga Charing, Brahman, don't have number of church. Based at the day and there and they not at the day, channel number to see Kebain some. Kebain Yapore, Donna Yapore. Don't know the progress. They'll come down, they'll go home. Don't know the kind. And they die on machine, money to achieve machine. When you do a Shapan and the Sunday, the Sunday Samba, what's the current and Chinese current, Chinese Sinjay, the Namsing Island, that they don't get punctured and some of the sort of tapas. They just in Jukin, Sunday, the country, and almost simply, but I know from the Sinjay, many don't get under the chicken, some. Come on, he thought the net, money don't get tapaja, Chinese. Jana coming to Tabaja, Karichi, Chutana, Yana, there's some current of the children at Persia, some of them. Such has on the deck. God, more. Young one did there are some of them to Tabipa. That you want to be those. Cloud don't she not regret. My sin assembly God. You need get up more than anything. Generosity. Okay, given that I didn't get the telephone, that is section to the telephone. The name and the card of Gyatrul. Rather than that, they think should get the records. Coral with a title grandson, chin the telephone with a high to go to Gyatrul. There is a sort of money, Chinese, non Chinese. Sebas Zomadan, like it's in a Gyatrul Rinpoche, you can forget it again. Young Chad, Jason, the young Chad, then young Chad, Jason, young Chad, young Chukaret, the Stablet on the Karin. Conjunction the Trend and Tinian, anything. The young Kadina, young Church commanding on the Karin, young Titanium, come on, Danish, should be come on the chip. In some day, they target the Donji get tea, tell us, somewhat, my own look in the Shataya, young, young Chad, young Chad. It's only young, I don't know, the good job done. Don't some around to the tiny color. Chutsa dinner. My name from good chick. Chick dog at the Tamas on the trunker chicken. Maybe not Chitana than it. Oh, time it is, and that's different. Go for it like it. Sarch over a minute. Time that got Sarch. Chutsa. There are chance on the day. One song of the sound of the song. Chutsa kitchen, Mama. So don't get the child. Stubborn chicken, the Kanka book, the lay upon my mother. So get the condiment. Chutsa lay. Chutsa the sound Tara the Namching of Komutomari. Cherakin don't get the good. Tara the Namching got round it, copper, Zandon, the Kura, Rondon. Yeah, how I choose a catchy. Mamma, Tabaruma was a share of it. I had it better like command on the oh, that's it. The kind of good, but the touch is a lesson. How does it? How does the lesson wasn't? The Zenkin they traveled at that. In Jindal. I think it's just a budget, just on. Chitsa, Yana, Yabur, Chitsa, when a Chitsa Yamar Yakan, Chitsa Yamar Money, Trabatum, the Tancha, Chitsa, Trabatum, Dongan, Chibu, Taratum, the Ranjan Nigaton, the Sunday, Chitsa, Sunday, Sunday. Patons of Mount Bani, you're not consuming the money you want to go. But you make on a vanilla to the Kebada.
Countertune.
Carry to the Chitok song, get top song, Nala song gets stronger than which you are. What was the Chitam door? That was a good of new coach, could come out from the Chitsa catching one. In a Chitsa sort of discipline check. Then there is a pizza in some types of that year. We think that thing for a there were you did of things in the beds in the you want to organic the arches and something about themselves. What about in the Polina? What I love about the page today upon it, Chichi for my chiches. The Dawachi they upon it. Then Chichi they upon it. Nima Chichi they upon it. You know, the Chisa chicken top and the chicken, the searching in the upon it. Chip. The upon what's a Sunday the song in the I don't know, Shannon. I'm just going to remember the thing that they know the China. Around your mother, Zanjor mother, I think it did. You're upset that some there. It's so that them to that didn't release a child. I woke up there. With the lots had some little children. No, come on. Sinners don't go at it. He woke up, he Zambot, the short on the top one. 맞아 진짜 그 어레 애들 뭐야 먹으면 어떤 수송인데 참. 마시고 내치 제좀 가르쳐 줬나요? 그 저들에서 제 생에 주득에서 나랑 또 빠르다 말하는 거예요. 이 시대는 청계도 지미가 냠돼서 하는 그저 당신이 이게 저는 지금 그 카페다 지금 있는 좀 저는 지나간 아이는 상대는 저를 그렇게 경험을 가지고 말이야. 바바 좀 되는 게 진짜 짝짝짝. 근데 안 잡던데. ini 거든요. 나 아는 와라티. 가게를 그냥 개발, 이놈아 그냥 개발. 아리가 개발. 나는 이제 힘들다 하래서 거기 கொஞ்சம். 아니 거기. 살아래 살아간다. 그다음에 내가 가져주는 카드가 vegetable 같은 쿠키 들어서 자르고 커피 그 샵도 전에 what do they call it? Spinach. Spinach and then it's a croissant. And it's been like this, nobody in the county. Delicious. Okay, so. So we like it now, but.
So again, coming back to this issue of exalted self-esteem, one may have the feeling that any of us here, that I'm very learned or knowledgeable. I know a lot about rituals, I know the sutras, I know Vajrayana. On the one hand, it's good to know such things, it's good to have knowledge, but it always comes back to motivation. Really looking at motivation, make sure it's pure, authentic motivation. As for myself, I don't know anything, so it's a different situation. I'm simply trying to follow the path of the previous Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and place my faith in them, try to follow in their footsteps. They have developed the bodhicitta, and so I have faith in them. I recite the money, place faith in Chenrezig. And this is a practice that, this kind of the general application of practice, reciting the money and so forth, this is something we can do. From the time we wake up in the morning, we can engage in whatever learning, thinking and meditation we can, whatever type of practice. At the end of the practice, dedicate the merit. In so doing, then we'll follow in the footsteps of the enlightened beings of the past. So whether our practices, we're doing verbal recitation. And in terms of dedication, this dedication may be a verbal recitation of liturgies, that is, of verses of dedication, or we may simply dedicate it mentally. Either way is fine. But what's very important too is when we finish our formal practice, for example in the morning, we have our time for formal practice, our meditation, our study, whatever it may be, reciting a mantra. At the end, after we've dedicated the merit, then it's important not to kind of snap our Dharma books closed or our prayer books and so forth, snap them closed, put them back in the shelf, and then start our major practice of the 8 worldly Dharmas. In other words, not closing the door on the authentic Dharma and then opening the door to all the 8 mundane concerns. The practice of mani, for example, reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, this is something we can do throughout the course of the day. We can do this quietly at work. Of course, we'll be distracted on occasion. We don't expect to be perfect in the practice. We'll become distracted. We'll forget about it on occasion. But we can keep on coming back to it as a recurrent thread throughout the course of the day, reciting the mani, recalling the qualities of the 3 jewels, taking refuge in them, establishing a motivation, especially in the morning, and then practicing as well as we can, without distraction. Dedicate the merit, but again, at the end of the formal practice, make a point of not closing the door on your practice. And also not getting too hung up on time. we can become really enslaved by clocks and wristwatches. So the point that, like, you're right, reciting wristwatch does not lead to any kind of deep realization. It just leads you down. So it's not important to be so hung up, so fixated on time, on the wristwatch, being dictated to by one's wristwatches, but rather finish the practice, regardless of what the wristwatch says. The wristwatches have never achieved liberation. Not even clear they've ever helped anybody achieve liberation. If we look at the great siddhas of the past, the great enlightened beings of the past, both in Tibet and India, it doesn't seem that they had wristwatches. And so for the sake of achieving our own ends, and for the sake of achieving other ends, put the practice over the timing. I recall an occasion years ago when I was teaching in Hawaii. I was asked to come out there and teach the nine yanas, 9 spiritual vehicles. I was in the midst of these teachings, and then the benefactor, the person who was sponsoring these teachings, actually as a monk, in the midst of my Dharma teaching, he looked at his wristwatch and he called over to me and said, "Time's up." I was flabbergasted. He was going to interrupt the Dharma teaching because his watch had told him, "We're finished." In that case, the watch actually becomes an obstacle. Clocks become an obstacle to Dharma practice. Again, the great masters of India, of Tibet, they didn't have wristwatches. But they still managed to bring about great benefit for themselves and others. So if you'd like to get some outside opinion, then you can turn to the Tuku to my left, and also Tenda Dorje. Ask them how helpful, what important role does the wristwatch play in terms of Dharma practice? Is that really needed to achieve enlightenment? Do wristwatches achieve liberation? Or do they just go around and round and round? On the one hand, wristwatch clocks, of course, can be useful. They have their role in the sense of kind of setting some kind of discipline. And that can be useful for mundane pursuits as well as for Dharma. But don't turn over the power of your practice to your wristwatch. In Tibet, on the other hand, where they didn't have wristwatches, they didn't have clocks, there was a large tradition of pointing out specific years and saying, "Oh, this is a very auspicious year for Dharma practice." Or this month, very special. You should practice Dharma this month, it's very auspicious. Or this week, or this day, or this hour. So they'd be finding, in terms of astrology and so forth and so on, they'd be finding particular occasions, periods when they said, "Oh, this is a very special time for practicing Dharma." On the one hand, that's good, insofar as these statements are based upon the teachings of the Buddha. On the one hand, good. On the other hand, if we really take stock of this precious human life, endowed with all freedoms and opportunities for practicing Dharma, we say this life as a whole is the best possible opportunity for practicing Dharma. This life imbued with the 5 external qualities, the 5 internal qualities of opportunity for practicing Dharma. There's no better time and no better opportunity for practicing Dharma than this entire human life with which we're presently endowed. And once it's over, once our life force is gone, and life is over, that's when time's out. Doesn't matter what your wristwatch says. Time's up when your life is over. So in the midst of this, then I see people listening with different kinds of responses. Yignet pulling his beard. Alan Wallace thinking, "I am knowledgeable in Garupa. I am knowledgeable in Nyingma. I am knowledgeable in Western customs. Not so sure about karma, though." And as for David, I'm not quite sure, but I think he likened you to a spinach croissant.
Everybody said Do you know that spinach croissant? Juicy, delicious. Really? Do you have any plans? We don't know. And then look at him. Delicious. Not dentro de Maranhão. Kamon the kitchen, but I walk among the somebody about them. Yeva, Yama, buying in the rounds of Kamon. I didn't around to the council. Things come together around to Nyingma by Nyingma. That's a Nyingma by the guiding. Tibetan Buddhist by the sun. Those are young about it. Friends and David taking that, and you take them, was your class. Good. Neither there are going to be done. That did a machine. Yeah, did a machine. Correct. Yeah, did that. I did touch at the minute, and Lama took at it. And then, Karanga, around to tune and the day. Young was a lot. Jabdor can say that. Carver can say to gently can say, Matt the letter. The leading the Jabdor letter, hard work the Chennai in Bureau at the time. How we did that to change the power. Jabdor did that to change the Paris Mazama. Now some people got not taking much here. You are going to get that to shiver a camera your positive. Don't buy a person. The Nicholas on the Sunday country, the number some Sunday. To conjecting can run to Kukumaran to make him Tonsa, and up the take a lapa was a thing tricky. You can then. Kuku Sunday. Subject about the Trubaz and or Sunday with Trubaz. You think that Sunday, Machava, Tom Nebazilla. The time Jack can enjoy one. Or that didn't have a long clinic. And too good a long clinic. I didn't try to put it. What in a bongi developed from the Maranson and other. So what on quarter, Hanaka chick.
Tamidapa.
Not chipa. Tamaka. That doesn't matter. That.
Tamidapa.
The other thing is that I don't say college because I couldn't around now. Long care the noise into that's on the example. I don't say. Then I don't say chicken, matter in Gyatrul Rinpoche, matter in Gyatrul Rinpoche, but the garden gym 3 other color. Music of some not chair, Mary Maran's much on. Chicken, Maran's or the other, Maran's. The killing go. The farm boats on the piano, treasure for company on the ground, as a toy in the unit. How go your money? No gave you sugar, as a girl is Zayat. Then I was around to sugar and around to the others into the plants. Then I just go long to sugar, it's a long to the others. Children, you could tell the thing, cricket from my bazar. That's why somebody shut it about Kerala. Watch it and Ngöndro Rinpoche. Or get it design that in Ngöndro Rinpoche could took it to 0 machine. That's it and that. Kashikaji is about that thing. But a couple shows some of them got up. They need Chori Mumboys, Sugar can drum it up. The tricky and then the sun you make up at the church, she song you get. Then around the children with Chori go from Mare. Or they did that time around the Yapo is the native give out the young boy the sheep and chicken chicken. Trickle of tin and the long kitty, long kill of tin, sugar dishes on now. But that isn't too bad if somebody will go back to prayer. Now the push button, you can carrot and do push it and then along something. I am the Dharmakaya and Zeta and Chibet in Gomara, and the Sambokaya and then in Gomara, Dharmanikaya. Naranja. Work out your bad Tranam, so then check it to quick cut and cook in Jeta, I'm joking, Yanta, something, whichever. Çünkü sonra samimi mütevellitin bunu çubuğun Gyatrul Rinpoche var. O da Gyatrul ne başlıyor son Dede dönem üzerinde Nyingma gençliği ve tam samimi mütevellitin de anlaşılıyor. Tabii da çoğunluğu da 나저 약과인다 나저 약과인다 보면 어찌를 따라서 있잖아. 근데 그만데 되는 거 때를 그때 생긴 달지. 그래서 그거다 또 저다 쭉 롱게 쭉그 전화제 하고 말만 잘 잡던 다때 잘한다. 자 그렇게 해만 돼 가는 것도 나이 말아 총체가 말아 컴퓨터부터 다 통해서 नाम चुनने ने तेरे वाले ये बात तो थोड़ा मार के नहीं होगा ने ये देख हमारे क्या है यार नोमो बात क्या चीज़ है तो के पांडा के तो बात नहीं यो तमाम क्यों भी सिंह वाला नाम के मानो तो कौन सा सोचो हमारे मानो से नाम वाला है मानो से नाम वाला है 다른 나중이나 나는 라마도 돼. I like a hymn. I like a Campbell. It's like a Chabad.
Like a what?
Oh, Chabad.
Chabet?
Java.
What?
Chabet?
Chabet.
As in diminutive of chubby. Oh. I'm slowly learning. This.
You know, he's jealous because he's skinny. I like that monk. He's sort of skinny in the dark. Not like that. I don't like that. That's what I'm good. Not like that. Oh, 나랑 농아를 시작을 했는데 그것도 상징을 개발했는데 현재 소소소소 공부 다른 점 다 쓰나 된 말했더니 혼나다 보통 특은 전례가 있나 생각이 본다. 내가 그냥 생각을 해라. 맞춰라. 왜 축복을 거 맞춰. 야고 이런 나빠 역시나 내일 좀 같이 있나? 아니 나랑서 뒷산지 몇 가지가 다 처리 진단을 진짜 그렇지. 마이나 잔이 유저 강가도 I don't care it. Oh, it's somebody's problem. Then 나오신 나랑서 나 예수인데 카톨릭인데 교직인데 그런데 그렇다는 때려 답을 잡고도 직진도 줘야 된다. 그렇게 그랬으니까 신청이다. 상계 변천. 알아도 간대네 하고 알아도 가리 듣고 있나 보네.
내 바지 신기를 더. 내 바지 신기를 더.
오케이.
나서. I better translate this quickly so I can get to the end. Oh yeah, come back from motivation. Very important. With good motivation, then this leads to wholesome behavior, although on the one hand, on the other hand, even though we may be demonstrating the outer display of behavior without a pure motivation, then the externality is of no value. So, I don't remember what exactly here. I think Rinpoche was here speaking about again, grasping onto one's own lineage, thinking, I am Nyingma, Gagyu. There are many lineages. Within the various major orders of Tibetan Buddhism, there are also specific lineages, and people may hold onto these very tightly. As far as myself, I've received many lineages, I've received many teachings, lineages from just different lineages. But generally, in terms of my own past of receiving Dharma, I have succumbed to all of the faults, the three classic faults of a container, being an upside-down container, a container with holes in it, a container that is contaminated. And so that's been my own approach. And that would go for the kind of the most sublime teachings, the Gyal Gonggu, the mind transmission of the enlightened ones. If one is not listening attentively, pure motivation, then not much benefit. But moving to the topic of tulkus, there have been and there continue to be countless tulkus, Nimanakayas, throughout the world. They're so vast a number, there's no possible way to count them. And each of these tulkus, these emanation bodies, derives from Sambhogakaya, and each of those derives from Dharmakaya. They are non-differentiated in their nature, in their actual nature. They are non-differentiated. And they are self-manifesting, rangnam. They are manifesting or naturally appearing. Now we, for the time being, don't have the opportunity. We don't have the occasion to meet with Sambhogakaya and Dharmakaya. Dharmakaya, in fact, we already are endowed, where each of us is already endowed with Dharmakaya. We already have it. Dharmakaya is already utterly immanent, present, but we don't accept it. We're like the beggar in the parable, who's actually got a great treasure, an inexhaustible treasure in his own little hut, but not knowing that, not recognizing it, not accepting it, then is wandering all over the place, just trying to scrounge up something to eat. We're in the same situation. We already have the Dharmakaya. Having a Dharmakaya, we already implicitly even have the Sambhogakaya. But not recognizing it. And then we're not able to draw full advantage from it. And we tend to be stingy in our outlook of how many Nimanakayas there are really in the world, true manifestations, emanation bodies of the Buddha. Some people will think it's only one. There's only been Buddha Shakyamuni. That was the only true Buddha that's appeared in recorded history. Some people might allow, well, maybe two. Maybe Padmasambhava, that was another Buddha. Some people then in Galupas might say, wait a minute, there's at least three. But a lot of people have a very short list, thinking Buddhas only are cropping up once in a while, very, very rare individuals. But in reality, there have been countless tulkus. It's easy to be sectarian, but when you really start to begin to appreciate how many countless manifestations of Nimanakayas there are, that completely overcomes any type of sectarian or prejudicial attitude. So trace these many tulkus to their source by learning, by really coming to understand Dharma, pondering it, meditating on it. And then you will see that all of this traces back to the Dharmakaya. We can ask, what is the purpose of all these Nimanakayas or tulkus manifesting in the world? Trying to make sense of this. This is a lot. Among the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nimanakaya, that those beings, those manifestations from whom we derive the greatest benefit are actually the tulkus, the Nimanakayas. Many come. And if we have faith in them, then we can derive great benefit from them. But when we think of ourselves as we are good, when we attribute to ourselves all the virtues, then we have a sense that we don't even need these tulkus, that they're really not needed at all. So once again, the Dharmakaya, in terms of direct access, very difficult. We can ask, why do the tulkus manifest? Is it for them, did they come here to do business? To become computer experts? To bomb Iraq? What did they come for? And they came really for one purpose, and that is to help sentient beings overcome our 84,000 collections of mental afflictions, of kleshas. That's what they really come for. But in terms of our relationship to teachers, to tulkus, we tend to be very superficial in kind of liking one, not liking another. So one might look over Khenpo and say, there's a tulku. I like him. I like the way he's chabet. Or the monk sitting next to him saying, I like that dark, skinny kind. On the other hand, to his left, Pumpkinhead, not so good. Not so drawn to Pumpkinhead. So there have been countless of these tulkus, and each one comes to serve sentient beings. And so we are really rich. We're living in this world. We are rich in terms of having so many tulkus present in the world. But we're rich if and only if we really appreciate the value of our own precious human rebirth and hold dear to these tulkus and appreciating them from what they are, and not, how do you say, adopting the sectarian attitude. If we have the sectarian attitude, then we don't even really care. So we encounter a tulku, we said, I don't care, or that's somebody else's problem. Or we may cling to our own tradition, thinking, I'm Christian, I'm of this faith, I'm of this tradition. And in which case then we block the blessings. But bear in mind the tulkus are innumerable, and they manifest in countless ways. And so even among other traditions, Christian tradition and so forth, it's certainly possible that there are manifestations of the Buddha, Nirmanakaya, serving sentient beings according to their needs. So the issue of tulkus is not a sectarian issue at all.
Too much? 그것도 나는 정하고 있으면 나는 저 출루도 전다 초리 내가지고 펜토크래 아까부터 이제 지금 상기를 들어가지고 상기를 하고 그래 어야 생전 유ten들 그거 뭔가서 생전 도시를 뭔가서 투마치 결혼제 있는 somebody 내가 내게 잠깐만 말해 생전 결혼 와이나 생전 트라우마 가지고 또 소소소하고 결혼도 밥에 자가서 칼라자가 밥에 자가서 미치게 자기한테 감각이 살고 말해 소소소소도 빠따가 칼라자가 그랬잖아 그냥 무슨 이시 이시게 say I like milk shake chocolate milk shake 그 chocolate milk shake 먹으면 통쾌 대중의 두꺼워 제가 나한테 신경을 떠나서 매캐 봐요. 나한테 벌써 나한테 양다리 주고 맞지. 어처럼처럼 생기가 보여줘도 생기가 전에 있어서 고민했는데 바로 지금 투서 맞추는 거 나만도 싫어요. 내가 카드 택받쳐 보이는 생겨는 다만으로 독지를 근데 저는 뭔가 말해 저는 지금 양직제는 막바에 막이 나세기 따리 나하고 있는데 감시 알아서 나이제 나 냠스 하나 담치고 답하고 방문 그 전에 담쳐가 답아야 답는데 근데 담쳐가 있어 담쳐가 내 담양 방법 이어폰 이렇게 됐다 추가 제가도 맛이에요. 저는 강나야 돼요. 서로 어떻게 담침도 숨. 그러면 야포에 되는지 엄청 양심지. 근데 여러 가지 연결해. 맞아. 방송 인다 양내 좀 주죠. Gyatrul Rinpoche nin lakme. 괜찮으신데. 번째 된다. 라마의 시송. 라마 시송될 때 라마 밀성거래. 제가 옛날에 지금 그래 라마 시송될 때 라마 말해. 나가 아랑트 네팔 네랑트 네자한테 아랑트리어라. 브라렉스.
오케이.
그런데 슈팅하는 사람 한바신게 라렉스만 봐. 라이어서 because the party wrote something wrote letter tamarwa ashna the treated tanatene para the rat sides and they put on much is my reason at the magic pekale was then the third person then some was that's also so rather explain that I should not use on that. Rather, the wrong trick and get the troll of the government. So, Tamaji Chernobyl, Lama, Chernobyl, Lama, Tapaya, the Chernobyl Lama, the chew, Chernobyl chew shape at that. 추처럼 그 뜻냠슬래는 근데 저런 게 시기다 그러나 아주 라마가 가르쳐는 추쇼할 때는 내가 가르리나 예수를 가르치고 하는데 감각이 냠슬래는 약보지다 일단 라마가 공부하는 그것은 특히 뭔가를 또 약보장 정말 약보지 또 발레 kumane to ne rakte de tere karanti de nepali ko counter de da inu hai rada se yu jamne de chikchene yapare chikchene kamshi pandas ke ne ano sanga mane panna mane ram chegena tere chegena khatsam de tabaya bin tabaya be tamak me de tamani ta lama shi chakile jara je tabaya ko se dan Rauter di nung thalang ni ni kane na ha ko na ma je chara yu da ne chara sa da ke de cha hai ma de ne te va do cha la ma ga a chi song de nyam se de ni ko gong da de ta pa ya ya ko ya chi chi te ne de chara de pe sha ya ba de song do song tam te de cha ne ya pa de
Då som det kartan? Då som det kartan?
do song de ko sung tu te ya
Oh, nice.
mana rauter mane de lama jap chi je te senje te ko phan to pe chong ye rauter ta thala na ni ja ne te senje ne chara do ko song tu shang so so chi nyam se de lama chne ye te ge ingre senje na phan to pe okay that I jama chen de rauter al masam da lama kombaya ta pa jap to masam che nyam se de de 그때 지난 많이 잘 돼. 진짜 알았지. 타바이가 소가 타바이 잡았는데 들이 전에 내가 차도 지단 들이. 그래 저도 타바이 앞으로 잡았다. 이 역시대로. 어때 마이나 다른 데를 놓다. 영 가지 그 지금 양내가 나를 치다 상황에 있다. 리트다 치제가 상황에. 예전에 제성사 가르르 버친 제성사 진짜 잠비한 제성 샤키야타간 제성사 진짜 다 뭔가 그래 그나마 뭔가 제성사 그나마 얘기를 하자 바로 말을 깔아 얘기야 제성 사대 젠데 사대 가르르 버친 사대 샤키야 that's not phenomenon so what 되게 따가잖아 제나 카츠무다네 먼저 저는 되나 맞아 내가 나에 나와라 그때는 정말 그래요 그 Dzogchen 제가 Dzogchen 이렇게 제가 정말 그거서
So when we really come to appreciate and understand the extent of tulkus and Nirmanakayas manifesting in the world, then this will definitely decrease any type of sectarian attitude or prejudicial attitude that we may have. Recognize just that there are an inconceivable number of tulkus manifesting in the world. But one might think, upon hearing this, well, it's not a bit of overkill. I mean, do we really need that many tulkus? I mean, we have a superabundance of tulkus. But consider when you go to a buffet. I mean, there's more food there than any one individual can eat. Nobody can eat it all. Some people go into say, I like chocolate milkshake. Well, for those such people, you have to have a chocolate milkshake. Other people, like tulku, might look at a chocolate milkshake and go, yuck. But there's a nice variety there because there's a variety of people coming to the buffet and they want different types of food. And so likewise, there's this vast array, inconceivable array of tulkus in order to serve these specific needs, individual needs of countless sentient beings. So we should really attend to our own business, that is, apply ourselves to our own Dharma practice, cultivate bodhicitta, cultivate the four immeasurables, the six perfections. All of this is good. But it's important too with respect to the Mahayana, that the Mahayana not be just something coming out of the mouth. If what is coming out of the mouth is the verses of bodhicitta and so forth, one has lip service, the Mahayana, but the mind remains toxic under the influence of mental afflictions, then one isn't even a Buddhist, let alone a Mahayana or a Bodhisattva. And likewise, there are people running around calling themselves Ngakpas. I'm a Tantrika. I'm a Vajrayana practitioner. But they don't even know what it means. What does it really mean to be a Ngakpa? It means that you have pure vision. You have faith. You're keeping your samayas. But without faith, then you can't even keep your samayas. It's impossible to keep your samayas without faith. So above all, in terms of Vajrayana practice, keep the samayas. I'll tell one story that took place in another country. I'll keep this all anonymous. But in that country, there was one Lama who passed away. He was a good man. He was a good Lama. And one of his disciples, approached me after the Lama's body had been cremated. Then the student went through the ashes, collected relics. So he had a lot of ashes from the Lamas. And I'm not quite sure if I get this wrong, then Rinpoche, please correct me. But he was wondering, what shall he do with these relics? Shall I distribute them? What shall I do with these? And so he was very concerned about how to handle this. Rinpoche said, it put me in a very difficult situation. I mean, if I said, yeah, distribute them, and make a big deal of them, didn't feel comfortable about that. On the other hand, if I say, oh, well, forget it, no big deal, didn't feel comfortable about that. So it was put me in rather...
No, he wanted the relics and wanted to put the ashes inside.
I
Where?
I think he's saying he wanted to go back in the Lama's ashes and put relics in there to make it look like...
Thank you. That one really went right over my head. That's a new one for me. That's not familiar Dharma. So, I mean, for anybody who didn't hear, he had the ashes from the cremation of the Lama's body, and he's wondering whether he wanted to maybe spice them up a little bit by putting some relics in there, so other people would then, have great reverence for the Lama. That really is a first. I'll wait for him up next. And so, Rinpoche said that put me in a difficult situation. I mean, this fellow presumably was wanting to do this out of reverence for the Lama, but to do this kind of sneaky business, well, yeah, tene karasa. So Rinpoche's response to him was, it's really better for you to practice. Practice the Dharma that your teacher, your Lama, taught you. And apply yourself, body, speech, and mind, to whatever kind of Dharma practices your teacher taught. Let that be the real priority. And if you'd like to create like stupas, statues, other kind of representations of the body, speech, and mind, things like stupas, and place these ashes within it, that's fine. That's fine. But in terms of doing anything else, like putting relics back in the ashes, big question mark there. Why don't you just remain quiet on that? Just remain quiet and focus on the essence. Once again, if you want to create stupa, something like that, that's just fine. That will be of service, that will be a benefit to others. That's good, that's okay. Yore.
He has a monastery, general.
Rela.
Take care of that.
Or di shugi.
A stupa, a statue, whatever.
Rela. Yeah.
Relics, ashes, so let me go.
No, that's it. That was just the next thing coming out. I did get that part. But I'll just paraphrase what Rinpoche just said. I mean, in terms of the ashes, don't make a big deal out of it. This Lama had a monastery, had a temple. So Rinpoche's advice to him was, well maintain this monastery. Take good care of the temple. Apply yourself to practice. But in fact, what happened is that as time passed after that, this person didn't take care of the monastery, didn't practice Dharma, and so it was really wound up being just a disgrace. And so the best is, first of all, have faith, and then proceed from that perspective. There are others who go into retreat, and then they come out with loud proclamations after coming out of retreat, having spent time in a hermitage, saying, oh, when I was in retreat, I actually had a direct vision of Genrezi, or I met Guru Rinpoche, I met Manjushri, I met Shakyamuni. Rinpoche listens to all this and says, these are just your phenomena, these are just appearances to your mind. So what? Why are you making such a big deal? These are just appearances to your mind. Why don't you be quiet about that? And just have faith. That's what's really important. Rather than just grasping to these appearances to your mind, you think of yourself as a Dzogchen practitioner, and yet you're doing all this grasping. This is incompatible with Dzogchen.
Okay. I want to cover this. My thought was no, I shouted and money sounded that I didn't enjoy it. Sending the tongue in Tibetan Buddhist economy, not happening in New York. They're one of the most in jail, Mary. Zongo Parichinson, the patient connection on the Lama to the Nakan. Yeah, the same jail done that. The tongue get on down, Mary. You think you get on the both in jail done down, Mary. Oh, Mary. The same jail done that, same jail at 3 hours check. But I'm sort of landing and then the 10, 30 and landing. Same jail done that, Martin, what's it on that? Lama to the Chili on this paper. Madam around today, Jim Majan is now as a second. Don't go around Madame Thompson, Madame Tended, Madame Tondit, Guru Rinpoche, a shot young mediums, a teacher performance. Porto Morto Chill, Pop Kanga the young girl, Messenger Madame was young girl. The Kanga is love gun, lots of them. I think charge of that. There's no one a Karisha, no one in that. And then they on the deep part of the Magiwaka, but the Kumban Mashon is good. Now, the Kanga lots of that. Which you love that there's something you must say. But then they came up, that's so good. Papa the common jet. I'm getting around to Nepal magic and Nepal not a cheap channel to cheat and then Nepal general. Tomba Nepal and the chip. I am calling Nepal and chip Nepal and thing about it and I'm going to take the channel to take them and don't Nepal. I think Mangeba to carry the truth with the church. Mangeba is the carry. Select it to put the zakat. Like, yes, like, there is a marriage to put the zakat. Same thing the Tana Mangeba. Tumba marriage, my marriage, to put the same thing. And Mangeba has it, the Mangeba to cannot take them in the black hole of Mangeba. Courage that in Aranche. Any Mangeba, choose the other, and they are carrying some latons. Choose. Josina, Chimia China, Kirsten courages at the net. What knows in the Lama they can recognize somebody. Then it's also good children gathered to come to check. So some of them that they take them to the way back. But I know there's some of them get really check, turn out to my some of them. A kind of machine I got you better. What time? May money don't get carried. All chariots of vision come in some. Lama and Lama, the chariots of it. I know some courts of my chariots of it. And then get them. And they are chariots of it. Long under the now. I don't know. Chariots of vision come back. The Paramanit. Imagine you're satisfied in it. That will.
So we come back to the importance of faith and pure vision. And if we read the accounts, the Namtar or life accounts of the great lamas of the past, we do find in many of their lives extraordinary feats of actually going to pure lands and so forth, having extraordinary experiences resulting from very, very high states of realization. But the reason they do these, or the reason these occur in the first place, is for the sake of sentient beings, in order to be of benefit to sentient beings, not so that they can boast about it afterwards. So it's helpful to recall the qualities of such great beings in the past, express the qualities of Dharma. But when we have our own experiences, for example, in dreams, I mean, some people when they have dreamed, then they'll talk later about having dreamed of Padmasambhava, dreamed of Shakyamuni Buddha, and so forth, and think this is something really extraordinary, and they have to proclaim it to the world about how extraordinary, exceptional, and sublime their dreams are. But why shouldn't Guru Rinpoche occur once in a while in a dream, or Buddha Shakyamuni? We have all kinds of dreams. We have old men and women appearing in dreams, pigs appearing in our dreams. Why not Guru Rinpoche? All kinds of stuff. There's just no way we can express all the type of phenomena or appearances that arise to our minds. If we should, consider all the dreams you've had. If you started having to tell everybody about all the dreams and all the appearances that arose to your mind, I mean, this whole building wouldn't be large enough to hold them all. They're just too many. So most important, just come back to faith, come back to pure vision. In terms of Sambhogakaya, you can find in many books that there are very specific circumstances under which these Sambhogakayas manifest. They are called 5 certainties. Or 5 definite aspects, a definite place, definite dharma, definite entourage, that is a circle of disciples. So they manifest only under very specific circumstances entailing these 5 certainties. Whereas Tukus and Imanakayas manifest without those types of, how do you say, not limitations, but without those types of criteria. So it's called mangepa. That is, there are no definite circumstances under which Tukus may or may not manifest. It's not just because they're slick or something. You have something kind of in that regard. It's just that they can manifest wherever possible. And again, they're not coming to do business. They're coming to be a benefit to sentient beings. But in terms of that distinction, these 5 definite qualities that are associated with Sambhogakaya, then there's no need to go into these. And specifically now, these have been written up in many books. But you'll find that there's, again, in such a context, a specific place for teaching, the teacher, the entourage, and so forth. You can read about this. But when all is said and done, in terms of basic practice, we don't need that much knowledge. I mean, we can recite the mani, and we can place our faith in Chenrezig. We can look upon our own gurus, Chenrezig, look upon the circle of disciples, fellow Dharma practitioners, as manifestations of Chenrezig, placing the faith there. We can recite the mani, and this is really, what's wrong with that? Is there anything missing there? This is okay. If you're not satisfied with such simple practice, that's fine. Then read and gain greater learning. So in the book, I think specifically in this book, the Words of My Perfect Teacher, then you can read about the 3 faults of the vessel, the 6, literally, I'm sure there's a much nicer translation, the timatu, 6 contaminations, literally means like 6 bad smells. If you're wondering what the 6 bad smells are, it doesn't have anything to do with deodorant or not washing properly, but you can read about that, exactly learning what these are. The 6 midzimba, not holding Rinpoche. The 6, again, that'd be a very clunky literal translation, but the 5 types of non-maintenance or not holding. These are faults, these are defects of the student, and so it's good to read about these, to read them and then to understand them clearly, and then to take it from the book and use these to inspect the quality of our own lives, to see which of these faults or these defects that we ourselves are prone to. So first reading the book, and then applying this through hearing, thinking, meditation, this is good. On the other hand, if you don't even learn what they are, and you actually are yourself imbued with all of these faults, these 3 faults, the 6 contaminations, the 5 non-maintenances, and then you still say, I'm a Dharma practitioner, well, then you become like me. That's a big disgrace.
Okay.
Junior.
shy.
Rinpoche just asked the person to the left, "Oh, what time is it?" And the person is intimidated to even answer.
Okay, I did turn the tomato the check out the shit. And then I don't chew and the chew to be carried out of it. I don't chew better. Tomato, the check out you made and I don't just the young at the chew and the children about it like a tin or what is it about. And the ten and children to commit it, and then I don't get that career in that. Can't make a lot and to get a single character and to get a parents. Wild. You got something under the kitchen. We need to do it. But I did Yanni and Ali and Popeye and Yagawa and Penny and such characters again. So, same sort of in the other beautiful. You got in a lot of the cashes and Sunday. Johnson, the tongue, ship or dog, Johnson, get blood at a chindow. What the nose in the problem?
So in terms of these various faults that are clearly explained in the text, it's good to understand them, and then again inspect to see whether you have them yourself, and then if so, then try to rectify them. One can ask, well, is simply, one may get the impression or hold on to the view that just basically coming to listen to Dharma teachings, that's equivalent to practice. But it's not. If we think of ourselves as Dharma practitioners, it's important to inspect, to look carefully at our own behavior, examine it, see what needs to be improved. And to examine especially our physical, and in addition to the mind, examine whatever comes out of our bodies, in terms of physical behavior, in terms of verbal behavior, and inspect this very carefully. Whether we are Chinese or American, Tibetans or Indians, our primary task in the practice of Dharma is to subdue our own minds. I say this very often, but I often get the impression that it's kind of like throwing a small rock into the ocean. Hardly makes any impression.
You can get
Komasai.
in the deep ocean and say the rocks millions of years and then exist under the ocean. They never go water inside, still dry.
I didn't get it. Thank you. Rinpoche has corrected my translation. It wasn't that the stone makes no impression in the ocean; it makes a tiny impression. But even if once it sits there, it never turns into water. It can stay there for thousands of years, and it never turns into water.
What does it mean? That means it doesn't benefit them. You teach you whatever you do. Still, if they treat it my way, their own way. Then it will be safe. Your way, what? Milk is sick. Okay, so I'm going to be